Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast. Now, we've got a little bit of a mini milestone today because this is episode 10 of our return after we kind of came to a bit of an end as an entirely independent product earlier this year. And this is episode 10 of us collaborating with the absolutely brilliant team at Run Try Bike as part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. So 10 episodes in, we've got a wonderful guest today in Ali Lopez, and I'll tell you a little bit about Ali in a minute before we introduce her. But despite how amazing our production team is and everyone at Run Try Bike, we need your help as well. So please go to the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network after we finish this conversation, or if you're listening on podcast, you can probably do it while you're listening to this, and click to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us absolutely massively to reach more and more people who can listen to this and hear the extraordinary stories of people like Ali and all the wonderful guests that our other hosts like Joe Hardin and Jason and so on have on their wonderful podcasts. So please do that, and it'll absolutely help us to reach more people, which is massively important. This is a growing network. We've got 7 different podcasts, and I get inspired by the guests that I have on here and by the stories that I hear on the rest of the network. So I hope you do as well. Anyway, enough of listening to me trying to give you a bit of a hard sell there. Let's talk a little bit about Ali Lopez. Ali is a bit of a late bloomer when it comes to running. She didn't take up the sport until she was 48 when she fell in love with it after completing a first half marathon. But she didn't mess around after that. Before long, she was running, qualifying for and completing the Boston Marathon. And not long after that, she discovered trail running and then ultra running. And she's just not stopped since then. So listen, let's talk to Ali. I found her on her Substack newsletter, Next Obvious Thing. Check that out as well. But let's bring her forward and let's have a chat with Ali about running. Hey, Ali, how you doing?
Good. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So listen, I mentioned briefly then that you didn't start running till a little bit later, 48. I'm 47 now, so starting the sport at this time must have been something a little bit different. What prompted you to suddenly decide that you wanted to give running a go?
I'm trying to think back to it because it was a while ago, even though it doesn't seem like a while ago. And I actually used to mountain bike a little bit. And at one point, I moved somewhere in some of my many moves, and I really wasn't able to mountain bike, but I still wanted to get outdoors. So I think that's when I just sort of took up just kind of running, just to kind of keep myself active. I lived in the woods, so kind of just running around dirt roads and things like that. And I think that's just where it started, but I didn't kind of get the hook right away. I think the hook came a little bit later when I was still doing like a 4-mile loop where I was living, and somebody I met said that she was training for a half marathon. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, that sounds cool. Maybe I'll try that. And that's kind of where it started after that.
Yeah. So was there a little bit of a competitive element in there that got your juices flowing? It was actually doing a race that sort of made you think, hey, I want to do a bit more of this.
I think so. And I think I'm not necessarily competitive with others, but like, hey, this sounds like a
Mm.
goal. This sounds like something
Yeah.
something I could work towards. And I was not really an athletic growing up as a teenager and my 20s. I mean, I smoked till I was 27, so I was not athletic. So I think sort of late in life, I thought, well, here's a good challenge. So yeah.
And how did it go? How did that first half marathon go? Because we hear some interesting stories from people who take on their sort of first half marathons or their first marathons, and sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it ends up being a disaster. So yeah, how was yours?
Well, actually, it went very well. But the funny thing was, my first half marathon was not the one I was training for. So I was training, and I was supposed to run the Philly half marathon in November. And at the time, I was working in upstate New York, and friends in Vermont, which was about a 2-hour drive from where I was. He said, "Hey, there's a 5K and a half marathon. Why don't you come down and run?" And I thought, well, I could try the half marathon then, try it out and see how it goes. And then I'll kind of know what I'm in for the bigger one. So it
So hold
worked
on,
well.
your training run for a half marathon was a half marathon.
Yeah, that kind of like, kind of leads to how we do things now.
No, I love that. That's brilliant. And it obviously went okay that first one, and presumably the bigger one went okay as well.
Yeah, it did. It did. Very different. The Vermont one was much smaller. I knew I knew the area. And then obviously Philly, a big city one, was a lot of fun, which went on to actually become my first marathon because the following year, the Philly marathon's real interesting because you get to one point in the course where the half marathoners go to finish and then the full marathoners go out to finish the race. And I remember looking that first year and looking at those people who were going out again. And I was like, that seems amazing. And I think in my head, I was like, okay, I'm doing this next year before I even finished the half marathon.
See, that's why you've probably got on to do some great running things, because I tend to do it the other way around. I'm doing the marathon, being jealous of all the half marathoners, thinking they've got can I follow them? So you obviously had the bug by then, and you went on and did you go on and do that Philly marathon the next year? Was that your
I
first sort
did.
of marathon? Yeah.
Yes, that was.
And before long, or before too long, qualifying for Boston. So you must have taken to running pretty well and been able to be a pretty good runner to be able to do that and to qualify for Boston.
Well, part of qualifying for Boston is that I was older. So those cutoff times got a little bit and this was I'm trying to remember what year I did Boston. Not quite 10 years ago, but the times have gotten even tougher now. So I don't even know if I
Yeah.
could have, could qualify now. But I do have some funny stories about qualifying. It didn't quite come so easy. I ran Philly and had no time goal at all. I was
Yeah.
just, I'm just going to do this. And I finished in like 4 hours and 20 minutes, which I thought that seems pretty good, you know?
Yep.
So then I said, all right, I'm going to sign up for another one. I want to see if I can get 4 hours because I thought in my head that was just a number. Like it sounds good. I didn't
Yeah.
know anything at the time of, all the way we are now with it. Um, and so I got 4 hours and 2 minutes. And I thought, wow, oh, I can come close to breaking 4 hours. Well, the next three marathons, I got 4 hours and 2 minutes. And
Oh,
then, yes, but then even better, the next one I got 4 hours and 2 seconds. So that one really hurt. That one really
yeah.
hurt. And that was in the spring. So I decided there is no way I am doing another one this year. So I signed up for one in the fall. Luckily, got 3 hours and 59 minutes for that one. And amazingly, it qualified me for Boston
Yeah.
because the year I did it, I registered the following year and I bumped up an age group. So I actually got 10 minutes in addition
Ah,
to my time because otherwise
yeah.
probably with 15 seconds or whatever I made it, I probably wouldn't have made it. So that's my Boston saga.
Oh, I mean, that's like Elliot Kipchoge chasing the sub 2 hour mark, but even more frustratingly close.
Yeah. And I love people who aren't runners and who would say to me like, "Well, couldn't you just speed up at the end?" It's like you don't know how I was speeding up at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the time when you've got nothing left to be speeding up with.
Yeah. And you never know. Your watch and the time clock, you're always kind of a little bit, you never know.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you're always kind of guessing when you cross the line, when the sort of chip officially started, and so on.
Yeah.
So, and you can never quite trust the brilliant job that I think they do, but you can never quite trust the pacers or anything either, because
Yeah.
they can't be, especially when it comes down to seconds. But well done on qualifying for Boston, and obviously made it there and finished it. What was that like doing a really iconic race like that?
Well, it's funny because my goal wasn't even to qualify for Boston. My goal was to break 4 hours. I just had this
Yeah.
weird thing in my head that I wanted to break 4 hours. And then when I did, somebody said, well, you probably can qualify for Boston with that. And I was like, yeah, but I don't really care about running that race. Like, because it
Right.
was big. It
Yeah.
was, I'm from New York. So New York, Boston, not necessarily, there's that rivalry. And I was like, well, I don't know. It's not my city. It's a big race.
Mm.
Um, I'd love to do New York. But um, finally enough people convinced me that no, if you got in, you have to do this race. You don't understand.
Yeah.
And so I did. And they were not wrong. It was, even not being my city, it was amazing. You feel like a
Yeah.
rock star for the day because, you know, you ride the subway. Well, it's not called the subway, but I'm calling it the subway. You ride the subway for free. You just walk around the city feeling like a, you know, a king and a queen. So so yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing. I never saw so many people just lining the course. It was, yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched it on TV, obviously, and seen how many people there are watching it. I guess the nearest comparison I could make is having seen my wife do the London Marathon last year,
Mm,
and with the huge numbers of crowds there, it's just incredible the way they cheer all the runners on, and I think it must be the same at somewhere like Boston. But
yeah, I'm
um,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, did you ever, or have you ever gone back and done and done New York, and also was it better?
There's a story too.
Right.
So New York has a lottery, and the lottery is incredibly difficult to get into because
Yeah.
of there's so many variables, there's so many layers to it. Like I don't even understand it. So I had put my name in for I want to say 5 or 6 years. It could even be 7, and I got in 2020, and the race was canceled in
Oh yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
20, and I think we had to decide, I want to say in the summer. So while COVID was still very real and very scary, um, we had to decide, do we want to put it off till next year? Do we want to just get a refund? And, you know, and at the time, I think I was just in such a COVID blur that I said,
Mm.
I'm just going to take the refund because I don't know when this thing is going to really happen. Now kicking myself because I've still put my name in every year to the
Uh,
lottery and have not run it. So
oh, well, good luck for getting in that lottery again. It is
yeah,
the
yeah,
way these majors and these massive races kind of do things. No one's ever quite happy with it because I think it's impossible. London obviously has the lottery. I've tried about 6 or 7 times, never got in.
yeah,
Uh, Michelle, my other half, tried 10 times and ended up giving in and do it. She actually did a charity place in the end, which is lovely, but it's pressure of its own. You have to raise like a couple of £1,000s, which is it's a lot of money to be pestering friends and relatives for. So
yes,
it's
yeah,
tough for people to get in these races. And yeah, it sounds like New York's the same. But then when you go the Boston route and start telling people they need to achieve times, that obviously some people don't like that either, do they?
right. I know. I don't think there's any perfect way. I mean, I guess at least the fact that I've been doing these ultras for a number of years now, the road marathons have a less and less appeal to me. So there's
Yeah,
less of that. Oh my gosh, I really want to do this. I mean, of course, I'll always put my name in for New York, just because it's my backyard. It's my home, and it
yeah,
would be fun. But I also feel like there's plenty of other races that I can have fun at. So
yeah, and that's one thing, isn't it, about trail running and ultra running is, there are huge races which are hard to get into. Let's UTMB or whatever, but not everyone's lining up to try and do those. And there are loads and loads of accessible ones which you can get into and have probably a slightly different vibe than you find in the road running
mm,
scene.
for sure. Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Although with my one ticket, I am putting in for Western States this year.
Okay.
I have one ticket.
If you win on one ticket, you're going to upset some people.
Well, no, I got a good story for that too. So after Vermont, I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit,
That's
but
okay.
after Vermont, I decided I wanted to get a tattoo to remember my first 100 miler, also my love of Vermont, which holds a deep, deep love in my heart. So I went and got a tattoo. I'm talking to the tattoo artist, and he had a running t-shirt on, and I said, "Oh, are you a runner as well?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Have you ever run Vermont?" He said, "Actually, I did." I go, "Oh, wow, that's cool." He goes, "And I ran Western States on one ticket from Vermont."
Oh, wow. So
So
there's a
I thought,
precedent.
he's doing my tattoo. What are the odds? I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah, it's meant to be. It's meant to be.
Yeah.
Well, when you've done Western States, we'll get you back on to find out how that went.
Okay.
Um, but I guess in the meantime, tell us about what moved you on from being a road runner to doing trails and to doing ultra marathoning, and what you love about doing those greater and greater distances.
um, what moved me on? I think what I was doing the marathons, and it was fine, um, but I never really felt like I wanted to get faster and faster and faster. And I felt like that's kind of what you do in road running,
Yeah,
is you
yeah,
try to improve your time. And a friend of mine invited me out to run. It's similar to like a backyard ultra. It was a 4 mile loop. I guess we call them timed ultras. So it was a 6 hour and a 12 hour ultra, timed race. They didn't call it, I don't know if even I called it an ultra. It was a timed race. So she said, you pretty much just run this 4 mile loop as many times as you want. There's not the pressure of a backyard where you had a time. You could run one loop, and then you could sit and chat with somebody for an hour if you wanted.
yeah,
So she was doing the 12 hour, and I said, "Well, I don't know about 12, but I'll try the 6 hour. Why not?" And so went and did this race, and just had a blast coming back through. Each time you came through the start finish, chatting with people, eating all sorts of, like, I wasn't eating gels and chews. It was like I was eating quesadillas and peanut butter, and I was like, this is
yeah,
amazing. It's like a party and a picnic. And I ended up with 32 miles in the 6 hours. And I was like, this is fun. And it really wasn't much harder than a marathon. I mean, it still was hard. There was a lot of hard to it, but it was fun. And so that was my kind of first entry into it. And then the people were amazing. Everyone was so supportive. It was just laid back.
mm,
And I loved the community of it. I think
yeah.
that's what kind of got me sucked into it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have those kind of races as well. The sort of 6 hours, and they would generally say, "Oh, look, you can do anything from you can do anything from 5K at the minimum up to however much you can do in the 6 hours." And exactly like you, I just love the thing of doing it. I came back from an injury and did a half marathon in one of them, just to kind of, it was my first one back from the injury. But I've also done. Not quite at your level, not far off, but I did 30 miles. So I did the 50K actually, so it's 31, isn't it? But in one of them as
Yeah.
well. But there's so much fun as you're going around. You just chat to people, and the really good thing I love about them is, because it's not point to point. If you're starting to struggle, you just stop, don't you?
Yeah.
uh, you don't
Yeah.
have to sort of go, well, I've not really DNF'd. That's just where I fancied finishing today. So
Exactly.
yeah, they're quite cool like
I've
that.
kind
But I
of
would,
Yeah, I've kind of gotten a reputation among a lot of my friends, with the runs that I do and my own adventures, I call them, because they're not really races, as the queen of the loops, because I absolutely love
yeah,
loops. I've used them in training for Vermont. I did a 5 mile loop where I lived, and I did it 10 times to get my 50 miler for my training. And it was a blast. Every loop, I had a new friend join me.
yeah,
Some
cool.
joined for three, some joined for one. It was, so yeah, I just love it. And in a race format too, you're being cheered, constant, constant excitement.
Yeah, I think so, and particularly for I think for family and friends, they just get to the
Mm.
start finish, and they don't have to try and get to all these different parts on the route to try and catch up with you as you go around. So uh,
Yeah, no
yeah,
logistics to deal with, right?
that's it. So yeah, no, I love them. So I'm completely with you on that front. But you have obviously at some stage decided to take the move to go on and do some point to point ultras. What sort of persuaded you to do that? Was it just a case of, I fancy doing a slightly bigger race or a different challenge?
I think it's always been to experience where it was. So when and the distance, because I like, all right, I could do a 50K. I knew I could do that. I did that 6 hour race actually 2 years in a row. I did that six
Yeah.
hour run. And then it just was like, okay, well, here's a 50K. This looks really pretty. This looks fun. I think I'll sign up for this one. And so I did a few 50Ks that way. Um, I've gone back to repeat races, but uh, for the most part now, I don't really like to because I feel like there's too much out there.
Yeah.
I'm later in life than, if I was 30, maybe it'd be different. Maybe I'd do the same races over and over again. But, there's finite amount of time. And so I feel like I want to experience a lot of different environments, a lot of different types of courses. Um, and then I guess once I did the 50K a few times, I sort of felt like, could I do 50 miles?
Yeah.
Um, and even at that point, I didn't really think I could, but this same friend that convinced me, I gotta love these good friends that we have who convince us that we could do anything. I'm talking to you, Erica, because I'm gonna make sure she listens to this. Um,
Hi, Erica.
she she was running, I don't know which, she's run a few 100 milers, and she was running the Mohican 100 miler, which is in Ohio in the States. And her and another friend were running it. And they said, well, there's a 50 mile. You should come do it.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had only run my 50Ks, and I was like, I don't even know how to train for something like that. Just do what you're doing, it'll be fine. So I did. And it was fine. But I think that's what hooked me. Like, wow, this was
Yeah.
really hard. I mean, it was hard because I didn't know what I was getting into. Um, but every time I thought it was hard, I thought, well, she's still out there because she was doing 100. And I was like, and then when I was done after, I don't know, 13 hours, something like that, 12 or 13 hours, I thought, oh my gosh, it's getting dark and she's only halfway through.
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't want to do 100 for a long time because I enjoyed the sunrise to sunset, and then being exhausted, but going home and sleeping in your own bed.
Yeah. Well, one thing I always find funny about kind of stage step ups in running is you kind of go 5K, 10K, well, that's okay. Half marathon, that's a bit of a jump. On my word, marathon. And then maybe 50K is not that much of a jump. And then you go like 50 miles, 100 miles, 200. What? Like that's just a logical step to take up
Yeah.
to time. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I've never done anything like that. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I did something called the Isle of Wight challenge, which was 100K. So yeah, but
Yeah.
we walked a lot of it, and that's actually what I was going to before I went off on my um, run distances thing. That's what I was going to ask you was how did you find the sort of transition from road running and marathons to ultras? Because it's a different, unless you're elite ultra runner, it's generally a different.
Hmm.
It's just a different form of running. And if you talk to marathon runners who are doing sub 4 marathon runners and you tell them about the idea of walking during a race, it's what? No. And you tell
Yeah.
that to an ultra runner, and they're like, well, yeah, what else would I be doing?
Yeah. What do you think? How are you going to get up that mountain?
Yeah, exactly. Did that sort of transition come naturally to you?
I think it did because I just started hanging around with those people. Um,
Yeah,
but I still came up against that all the time, though, when I would go to weekly, like the run groups that meet. And most of those people are road runners
yeah,
and love the 5K and the 10K and the five. You can please make me run anything but a 5K. I despise a 5K. That's my warm up. Like I feel horrible for 2 miles and then, okay, we can
yeah,
start running. But I would get that same thing, like, how do you run 100 miles? And I'm just like, the same way you run a 5K. You
mm,
just go out and do what you can do and you keep moving forward. But what I always find funny is people who haven't run that distance and don't know that you're hiking and you're stopping to eat and you're,
Yeah.
like people will say like, so do you sleep when you run 100 miles? Like, well, some people do, but I'm not fast enough to sleep. So, but, but the other thing I would get is, what's your pace? What was your pace? And,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just like my pace. Like if I was going to look at my watch, I would fall on my face. Like I'm not looking at my pace while I'm running
Yeah.
100 miles. And for a road runner, like a real serious road runner, they find that impossible to do, is to not know your pace. I mean, my pace, the only time I'm concerned about my pace is will I make the cutoff? Like that's
Yes.
when I'm concerned about my pace is like,
Yeah.
I know sort of depending on the terrain and depending on the course, there's certain races I won't sign up for because I've done like a 12-hour cutoff 50 miler and it was very, very hilly and technical. And I'm a
Mm.
much slower runner and it was so stressful. And I finished within 1 minute of the cutoff. And
Wow.
I said, that's not fun. Like I
Yeah.
need it to be fun. Like, all right, if I could finish within 15 minutes, that's a good enough challenge. But 1 minute, it was so stressful that second half of that whole race.
Yeah.
Um, so I give myself a challenge, but I also want to have fun. Um,
Yeah,
in doing
definitely.
it.
The thing that always, or the race that always stands out to me when it comes to cut-off times is watching people at Comrades who come in. Is it 12 hours the cut-off there, where they literally, if they hit the line at 12:01 or whatever it is, that's it. They don't get they've
Oh,
DNF. They haven't finished. They don't get a medal. They don't get anything. And it's like the people the disappointment at the end of that race it must be crushing for
yeah,
people
I
to have
can't
to go
imagine.
through that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
one I did like that, they actually, as long as you made the cutoff at the last aid station, which was 3 miles from the finish,
yeah.
they would let you finish, which was
Okay.
very kind. I still made it under 12, but I felt like, you know, oh my gosh, getting to mile 47 and then saying, sorry, you got to go.
Yeah, yeah. I can't imagine how horrible that would be.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Vermont, because the Vermont 100, you decided to give that a crack, and well, um, it was a race you were supposed to run last year, wasn't it? But that
Yes.
didn't happen. Tell people what happened there.
Well, I guess I can backtrack a little by saying how I picked it.
Yeah, yeah,
I've lived in Vermont. I guess I figured it out the other day. In 25 years, I've lived there 5 different times. I've traveled a lot and worked in a lot of different places, a lot of different states, but yet I'm constantly pulled back to Vermont. So I was living in Vermont and I had a bunch of friends who had run Vermont. I had heard about it. At that point, I'd only run 50 miles, or I had done 100K, and really had no interest in 100 miles. I was like, no, I like to sleep. I don't really need to go overnight. I have some vision issues, so I also was worried about running at night. But I decided, you know what? I'm in Vermont. I'm going to volunteer. So in 2022, I signed up to volunteer at the Vermont 100. And it was the most amazing experience outside of running a race. Being a volunteer there, seeing the runners come through. I met this amazing couple at the aid station. We volunteered together the whole day. Fast forward, her and her husband ended up being my crew when I ran. And I just thought, this looks so cool. So the race was over that year. And in December, this woman who I became friends with, Lisa, had sent me a message saying, they'll give a lottery bypass to one person from each aid station. I don't think anyone's taking ours. So why don't you sign up for it? And I was like, well, if I do this, will you be my crew? That was my caveat. And she
yeah,
goes, oh yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it. And her husband had actually run the race a few years earlier. So I signed up for it literally because she said she would crew me. Um,
yeah,
so that was 2023. So started training in January. Didn't know what I was doing, but I talked to friends who run the race and they gave me some advice on how to train. And then 3 days before the race, I think it was Tuesday. It was a Tuesday. The race was supposed to be Saturday. Um, we had torrential flooding, really devastating, catastrophic flooding in Vermont. Um, Roads and towns and just horrendous flooding. Actually seeing what's going on in Asheville now, I had like immense PTSD remembering the flooding. So the Tuesday before, we got an email from the flooding had happened a few days before. The Tuesday before the race, we got an email from the race director, and she had to make the hard call of deciding to cancel the race because it was the only decision she could make, because you couldn't put people's lives at risk like that.
Yeah.
Both the runners, the crews, the emergency people that might have to come out and try to rescue somebody. So it was canceled. And it was heartbreaking, but it was more heartbreaking to see what happened to my state.
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't run it in 2023.
Was there any thought when you didn't run it in 2023? Oh, that's it. I can't go through all this training again for a 100 miler, or was it? Were you even more determined to do it again then?
I think I was even more determined. And what a
Mm.
lot of people would say to me is, well, just find another race because you're all trained. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want another race. Like, I feel like for me, I needed a race that I had my heart tied to, because that's what's going to pull me through at mile 70.
Yeah.
Like if it's just some race, for me personally, for some people, it's just, I want to conquer that distance, and that's great. For me, I knew I needed something more personal and a reason why. So I thought, okay, I'll find something else to do in the fall. Maybe that's going to, give me that, kind of put my miles to use. But
Yeah.
what I always say is I love the training, and I think you have to, because that can happen with any race. You train and train and train, and then something happens, and so you say, I did all that training for nothing, and that's not it at all. I love the training. I had so many fun training runs with different friends and adventures, uh, that I still felt um, like wasn't wasted. And
Mm.
in fact, my friend Erica, the one who convinced me to do that first ultra, was coming out to Vermont from Michigan to run my first 100 miler with me. She signed up for it as a 100 miler herself. Um, and she couldn't cancel. She had her vacation was going to be in Vermont. So we did run 20 miles that Saturday together. Not the 100, but it was still special. It was still very special.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think to a degree with any race, you have to love it, but particularly when you're talking about the kind of distances you're talking, because it requires so much training. If you were kind of only all about the race, well, you'd never get to the race, would you? Because you just wouldn't have the ability to go out on those rainy days, or those really hot days, or the days you just didn't feel like it, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So yeah, so when this year's lottery opened up, I like put my name in right away, and said, okay, I'm doing this in 2024. And Lisa and Scott signed on again to be my crew. Another woman who I met at a different race was going to be my pacer. So I was all dialed in again. And then the week before the race, Vermont had, like, on the exact same day we had the flooding last year, we had flooding again. Luckily, the flooding was not in the area of the race. It was still pretty devastating for certain parts of the state,
Yeah.
but the race was able to go on. Because when that happened, we all thought, "Oh my gosh, what is happening?"
I mean, is that
So
is that sorry for me as much as anything, but probably for other listeners who might be in different places around the world, is that normal for Vermont to get that kind of
no,
rain?
no. I mean, we get rain like anywhere else, but
Sure.
what happened here is it was heavy, consistent rain when we had already had a lot of rain, so the ground was very soaked. And
Yeah.
Vermont's terrain is also extremely mountainous, but we have rivers and streams that flow down, and typically they're not raging rivers because
Mm.
they're just from snowmelt for the most part. But what happened with so much rain is the ground just couldn't absorb it. And then they just would flood the banks. And then because the
Yeah.
ground was soft, trees would come down, and then that caused problems of its own. So it's not a typical, although with climate change, sadly, it could be more typical.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, well, just such well, bad luck, I suppose, to have had it for 1 year and then almost the next. Did it
yeah.
affect? Did it affect your actual race? Because of course you did actually manage to get out there and do it this year.
It did not. Luckily, I was able to, my area where I was living was not affected, and my where the race was, which was about an hour south of where I live, was not affected. So yeah, so was able to go on. We had amazing weather. I mean, Vermont in July um, typically is very warm and very humid. Doesn't always have to be unbearably hot, but it can be because it's the
Mm.
northeast of the US in July. But we were pretty lucky. It never got super hot. I mean, yeah, you're going to get warm midday, but the humidity was no humidity, comparative to some years. So we
Yeah.
really lucked out. It didn't get too cold at night. So, you know, there wasn't that huge difference. I wish I could say it went so smooth, but does any 100 miles go smooth? But I finished, and
Yeah.
that's what matters. And could not have without my amazing crew, and I thank them a million times over and over. Um, so yeah, so it felt very sweet to get that buckle.
Oh, fantastic. Well, yeah, big shout out to volunteers. You mentioned volunteers earlier and to crew members because nobody could do these races without them, really.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Uh, uh, and also, I've read your Substack. We mentioned it earlier. Next obvious thing, go and check that out, folks. When you talk about the experience of Vermont and you call it life in a day, which I think is just a lovely description of ultra running as a as what we do sometimes with these things that last a day. But you also sort of celebrate doing hard things. There was a line towards the end, I think, which says, "Even when I didn't know how I would finish it, I never wanted to quit," which I think is you kind of need that to get through those races and the extremes that you have within them.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I look at it as I there were many times I didn't know how I was going to finish it, and
Mm.
I said, this is a hard thing you pick to do. That's also something I tell myself. There's so many hard things in life that we all have that we don't have a choice in, whatever that is. And I had one of those personally 7 years ago. I had a really bad accident. I almost lost my vision. And it was hard coming back from that. And I did that. And I remind myself of that when I'm in a hard thing. Hey, wait, nobody is making you be out here running at 2 in the morning. Okay. This is something you chose, and you chose this hard thing. And to remind myself, like, yes, I chose this because this is fun. This is what I want to be doing. Even though it
Yeah.
might not seem like it in that moment when you're dry heaving on the side of the road or not able to pick yourself up, um, you know that it'll pass because it will. And that was part of life in a day. Like, you might feel amazing, but don't hold on to that because in in another hour you're going to be crying on the side of the road, and then you're going to be happy again. And just like life.
I think that's a really interesting thing because quite often people will think about how hard it is to get through the lows of a race or even the lows of life generally. But quite often when you sort of, I mean, I've done some basic mindfulness stuff, and one of the things they say there is also don't get carried away by the highs, because if you get too
Yeah,
carried away by the highs, you can almost sort of expect that to be normal, and it never is, isn't it? Is it either in life
right.
or in those races?
Yeah, and there's so many parallels with life and with running. I just find that so much. And we have to learn because you will get carried away by that high because you feel amazing and you run up that hill way too fast, and then you get to the top and you're like, okay, what did I just do?
Yeah.
Just like when you get carried away in something really exciting in your life, you may kind of just act, crazy at certain points. But again, the other part, I think that we have to remember in life and running is that we don't have to do it by ourselves. And for ultra running, especially, the volunteers, the people who are cheering for you or other people,
Mm.
um, it's all about community. And like I said, I didn't know how I was going to finish that race. And when I was sitting there in the chair, like with my head between my knees, my crew was like, I said, how am I can't even stand up to go to the bathroom. And they're like, you don't have to worry about how. That's our job. We'll figure out how. You just get food in you. And I just had to say, okay. I just had to trust them. And I
Yeah.
think in life too, if we just learn, like, if somebody tells us something's going to be okay and we want to spiral in our heads, well, maybe it will be okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't, but maybe it will. And maybe we just need to trust a little more in the process.
Mm. And at the end of the day, I suppose, if you just were to give up at that point, well, that's it. If you try and invest in it may be okay, then yeah, okay, it still might be rubbish, but
Yeah.
at least you're giving yourself a chance. Um,
Right. Yeah.
uh, I guess one of the things for you that would fall under that rubbish category, you mentioned it just briefly there, was the eye injury that you suffered. Um, from my memory from reading the Substack, it was quite unusual circumstances as
Yeah.
well, which must have left you doubly frustrated. But I think it's left you with impaired vision. How hard? I mean, I don't know if you could maybe very quickly explain to people what happened, but also how much harder it makes you to run it makes it for you to run at night, and what things you have to put in place to get over that, I suppose.
Sure. So it's my left eye, and I had an incident where I was using one of those exercise bands at home for a shoulder injury unrelated to running. And the exercise band snapped. It was on the door and basically came like a slingshot and hit me in the eye. Ended up with a detached retina, a lot of other issues, had 4 or 5 surgeries, and they were able to give me vision back, which was amazing because I didn't know if I would have no vision, because I had no vision when it happened. I was constantly during my rehab. During when I would come back from a surgery, I'd keep putting my hand over my right eye to see if I could see anything, and it was black. And I just kept having to say, okay, well, they said it was going to be like this. Like, it's going to take
Yeah.
time. Um, but so over It's been 7 years now, and the first few years back was very challenging because with depth perception, my depth perception is a little bit off. I have no peripheral in my left, so on your left I literally have to turn my head to the right to see somebody on my left. But the human body's pretty amazing
Mm.
because my right eye has compensated so much that I feel like my vision has, over the last couple of years, gotten a little bit better. Only because I've gotten so used to it, and I think my body's compensated. I still don't have the peripheral,
Yeah.
but because people would say, "Well, why are you running trails if your depth perception's so bad?" I said, "Because I love them." So I just slow down. I just have to slow down more than I, used to, because I don't want to fall. Fall more. We all still fall. Um, but yeah, so it makes it challenging. At night I have some challenges, but it's more glare that actually, so headlamps into my eyes, because I this pupil also stays dilated. It doesn't get smaller when someone shines a light in it. So
Right.
if people are coming at me with headlamps, it really is disorienting. So it's smaller adjustments that I just have to make. But I'll take them for the fact that I can still see, I can still get out there, and yeah.
And there was never a thought of you thinking that it might stop you from running. You were determined to keep going, this thing that you'd grown to love by that point.
Yeah, I mean, my surgeon was amazing. My surgeon, when I first went in, the first surgeon that I saw, he kind of looked at my chart, or I don't even know what information he had, but he said, "Oh, it looks like you're an athlete." And I must have said that at some point. And he had said, and I never really thought of myself as an athlete, but he goes, "Well, I don't think you'd be able to train for a while." But he had said for a while. He had never said, "I think you might not be able to do this anymore, which I
Yeah.
don't know if I would have believed. But at every stage of the game, every surgery, every visit that I would come back, he would say, cautiously optimistic. And so he was cautiously optimistic, so was I. And I just
Yeah.
wasn't going to let that go. And ironically, my first race, I say, after my injury, I was allowed to walk. I wasn't allowed to walk. I wasn't allowed to get up off the couch for like almost 2 months. The recovery was really my hardest ultra. But my first group run at back, was a 5K race.
Yeah.
And I literally cried at the end. Not
Yeah.
because I hated the 5K, but that I was running again.
Yeah. Oh, no, well, that's fantastic. And then to go from there and achieve what you've done since is just phenomenal. But I also know that running has been such a big thing in your life for you in terms of, I don't know if mental health's the right word, but I know you've sort of used it as part of your recovery from anorexia and bulimia and things which you suffered when you were much younger. You mentioned earlier about not necessarily being particularly fit and so on as a youngster and smoking till you were 27
Yeah.
and so on. But yeah, how has running helped you in with those aspects?
I think it's just reframed in my mind how my body is so much more of what it can do
Mm,
than what it looks like. And of course, coming from a place of privilege, I, have a fine, average body. I don't have any issues with it. But I mean, societal issues, I guess I should say. It, looks just like a fine body. Why should I have issues? But again, it's it's reframed in my mind. My body can do all of these amazing things as long as I feed it, and I
yeah,
can't not feed it anymore. Um, and again, I hadn't been actively having an active eating disorder, but I've written about eating disorders as well, and having experienced them for many years in in the olden days when no one knew what they were even,
yeah,
or how to treat them.
mm,
So treatment has been very, over the years, self-directed, I guess, but also just realizing now how much how important it is. And I've just looked at my body in a different way than I've ever looked at it before.
mm.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, and are you surprised? I mean, not just on that aspect, but generally, does the power of the human body and just what it can do? I mean, you look back at starting running at 48. Would you have ever sort of thought that your body, that you were capable of running 100 milers and doing the things that you've done?
Oh my gosh, no, no. Which is why, I look at people doing these amazing, amazing accomplishments, and people older than me, like doing these amazing things that I can't even imagine doing it. Um, yeah, it constantly amazes me that it's so much here. Like if we tell ourselves we can't do something, we can't do something. Like I said, like I didn't know how I was going to finish that race, but like it was never in my head like, oh, what if I don't finish this? What if I don't? It was like, I don't know how, but I need to finish this. I want to do this. Like the desire was there. And so when they say, like they joke around that, whatever it is, like 99% of running a race is mental, and the rest is
Yeah,
mental. Like it
yeah,
really truly is. I mean, yeah, you have to have some physical ability, you have to be able to train,
mm,
but I think so many more people could do so many more things, athletically or not, just because of what we tell ourselves. And yeah, again,
yeah,
running in life, I've too many parallels. People ask me why I love running, and it's like, because it brings things back into focus. It makes you're out on a run, you have some of the most amazing thoughts that you're going to have, um, and not related to running, just related to your life and what's going on.
mm.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think running really helps with things like problem solving and so on. Whether that's because you come up with a solution while you're out there, or whether it just means that when you hit a situation in life, you're like, wow, you know, I hit that. I hit that point where I couldn't walk another step after 80 miles, and I did. So I know I
Yeah,
can get
exactly.
I can do hard things. One thing, sadly, that you couldn't do, because you were cursed yet again by the rain, was your plan to run a another 100 miler at the Yeti run in Virginia. And once again, it got. I think it was earlier this month. Was it? It got cursed by the weather.
Ah, thank you, Helene. Yes. Um, Hurricane Helene, for those of you who are not, you know, maybe up on it. But yeah, I had a few friends joke with me that I need to pick a drought resistant area for my next race. Um, but I mean, a drought area, not resistant. Um, yeah, I was down there, and I had picked this race. Actually, I signed up for it before Vermont because it had a lottery. Not a lottery. It had a first come first sign up on New Year's Day, so I was able to sign up for it before I was running Vermont. I thought, well, it'll be my backup race or it'll just be a celebration race. But I really wanted to run this race. I'd heard really good things about it. Yeah, so we made it down there on Wednesday, and we knew the rain was in the forecast. Like that was not a doubt. It was gonna be wet, and I was trying to figure out. I didn't have a crew, I didn't have a pacer. My partner was coming with me, but as I said to him, I'm not relying on you for anything in the race, not anything in life. He laughed at that. You're not relying on me at all. No, if I see you, it's a bonus. But he's not a
Yeah,
runner, so I just said, look, this is me. So I went and got all the rain gear, and I just planned I would just be wet, and I would just figure out how to do this. And the race was supposed to start Friday morning. Thursday, they said, okay, we're still looking at things, but we may move the race to Saturday. The forecast looks much better for Saturday. We're going to move it to Saturday. So I was like, okay, that's fine. We just spend an extra day and I'll have another day to eat more bagels, that's
yeah,
fine. But Friday morning, the Thursday night into Friday morning, the weather was horrible. And Friday afternoon, we got the email from the race director. He was heartbroken because not only did he have to cancel the race, but people were unaccounted for, houses were floating down the river. It was bad. It was really bad. The
yeah,
town of Damascus, where the race was supposed to go to, was just not almost not there. Um, so again, while it was sad not to be able to run the race, my heart just went out to all of the people, and I knew that that was his right decision. So again, I had enjoyed my training. So I went out after I got that email, I needed to go burn some energy. So I
yeah,
just the course, the creeper trail that it was on was closed, but I just went into town and I ran up every hill I could find. And I got my Yeti 10 miler, I call it, as my, just release, to cry and smile and be grateful. So
yeah.
yeah.
And be grateful is interesting, is it? Because you still managed to get out there, and it's also, I suppose, you know being grateful that you're not in the situation of those poor other people who are losing their homes and so on, losing the ability to run a race. Yeah, it's sad you want to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but at that point when livelihoods and etc. are being lost, it really isn't that important, is it? I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I can run tomorrow. Some of these people will not be running for a while. Some of these people won't even be here and their house won't be there.
Yeah,
So yeah, and gratitude is always something I run with. I'm just so grateful that I get to be here. I get to do this. No one's making me. When I hear people say I have to go for a run, no, no, you get to go for a run.
yeah.
You don't have to do anything. You get to go for a run, and yeah, yeah, just really really grateful.
No,
And we
no, I
did
like.
still have we did still have packet pickup, and all the runners. You would not have known that we weren't going to run a race the next day. Everyone was just so grateful that they were
Hmm,
able to be here and support the community. And the race director donated all the race proceeds, all of our entry fees, to the town for the
wow.
recovery effort. So I felt like, okay, this is a good thing. I didn't feel like,
Yeah,
oh darn, I'm out money. Like, no, here's my gift to this community. So,
Yeah.
and I'll
Yeah.
be back next year.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I just wanted to pause very quickly to read a couple of comments that we got came in, which really sort of resonate with the conversation we've been having actually, and even with this part of it. Jason, who is producing this, Jason Bahamundi, said you run 100 miles by running 1 mile 100 times, which I think is
Yep.
bit of a truism, but it's definitely true.
Yeah.
And we also had a comment from Badwater06 to say that I've found that running ultras has helped me to get through some especially difficult times at work, which again is fits in exactly with what we've been talking
Mm-hmm.
about today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, my next question to you was going to be what next, and are you going to be doing what you did with Vermont and going back and giving this one another go too?
I probably won't go back and do Vermont. I would like to do another 100. I don't have one picked out besides Yeti next year. I
Yeah,
would
sorry, that's what I
love,
phrased that question really badly. I meant are you going to go back and do
yeah.
Yeti after the floods?
I would love to because the community was lovely and I really want to be part of it. So I would like to go back and do that one as well. Um, yeah. So, but I don't have anything else besides Western States, of course,
Yeah,
on the horizon. So I can't really plan anything for June right now. So we'll see.
and now that you're a seasoned 100-mile ultra runner, um, is it, would there be thoughts of going beyond that and doing even further distances, or are you drawing a line at that point?
Oh, absolutely no drawing of any lines. Except I would love to do a 200 miler because from what I see from them, and I have a friend that's her and her husband have done one, actually the same one 3 times already over across the pond, I should say, the Wales, the 200 in Wales.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
trying to
yeah.
remember the name of it.
No, neither
Wilds.
can I, and I should know, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, they've done it for 3 years now, and they absolutely love that race. But I would love to do a 200. The biggest problem for me would be I know I would need a crew for that, and to have people have to give up that much time,
yeah,
to crew someone for 5 days, and or however long it takes. It's a lot. It's a big ask. So for me, the hardest thing about figuring out if I could do a 200 is figuring out if I could find a support team to help me do it. But the mileage of it doesn't scare me. It's the logistics and having the support of a team help me.
yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that and the mileage not worrying you, and the sort of shift, I suppose, in your mindset between that and how you felt you'd sort of never be able to do the 100. Didn't really feel like you were going to do that, and I suppose I wonder whether it's doing the 100 that in itself which has made that happen for you.
Oh, it totally did. I mean, because I had never run at night. I mean, I ran at night, 6 o'clock at night, our group run in the dark for 3 miles with headlamps and around town, but I had never run for 8, 9 hours in the dark on trails in the middle of the woods.
Yeah,
Um, for that long. I'd never done that. And I did it again with a pacer, thank goodness, because I also get lost very easily on daylight trails. So that was very helpful. So yeah, so I guess that was my biggest fear with the 100 miler was all that running in the dark. And not that I'm afraid of the dark, but just getting lost and not knowing where I am in the middle of very dark woods. Um, so yeah, so 200 as long as I have some company with me.
right. So yeah, there we go. If anybody wants to accompany Ali on a
Yes,
200 miler or wants to crew for her, let us know, because
yes.
yeah, we're going to get
I'm
her
a
out
lot of
there
fun.
and get her out there and doing this, because it was absolutely amazing. Ali, thank you so much for joining us today on the Running Tales podcast. Really, really, really appreciate it. Jason says he's got plenty of people who'd be happy to take part and help you along and do that. So yeah,
Yes.
let's make this happen.
Yes.
be great. Yeah, thank you so much, Ali. Really appreciate you coming on today, folks out there. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, well, we're live at the moment. The podcast will be out on Thursday. Wherever you are, give us a like. Tell your friends all about what we do. Mention the Everyday Athlete podcast to absolutely everyone you know in the running community, and we know it's such a wonderful community that you'll keep backing us. So thank you so much, and we'll on Running Tales, we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. And of course, there'll be lots of other wonderful shows in the meantime on the network. And just finally, thanks again for joining me, Ali.
Yes, thank you.